I think right now, probably the best time would be to go into the varieties. At WestBred, you know of WestBred because we're a breeding program that has different wheat varieties for you, the farmer, to grow on your farm. You'll see behind me 4 or 5 WestBred varieties, and I'd like to give you just a quick sort of the fit for that variety, where they can be grown, the opportunity, what are their strengths, and perhaps the watch out, so that as you try one of these varieties or you figure out where they're growing on your farm, you can make the best decisions possible. So with that, you can see behind me here a few different varieties. I think I'll just stand right here and kind of talk about them as we go. First, we have Mayville. I'm not sure if you can see that on the camera, but we have the variety WB Mayville. WB Mayville, the fit. The fit, many of you know it because you've grown the variety for so many years. The fit are those high productivity acres where you want to push yield to the brink with high fertility and then get no problems with standability along the way. And that's what WestBred Mayville is. Pushing the yields, collecting nice protein, 14, 15%, and just not having to worry about standability. That's WestBred Mayville. But as we go along, we actually have a variety that would be a little bit pushing the dial forward other than a Mayville. And so I'll kind of compare and contrast as we get going a little further.
Our production of Mayville has decreased drastically. For all practical purposes, this will be the last year that there will be any production of Mayville, and Grant is going to talk about the varieties that are replacing Mayville.
Absolutely right. So our next variety as we move along down the line is WB 9590. WB 9590, very popular variety. It's out on a lot of acres this year in the state of Minnesota and North Dakota. What's its fit, its opportunity, and its watch out? Well, the fit for 9590 almost knows no bounds. It's being grown across a lot of the spring wheat growing areas of South Dakota, almost all in North Dakota, everywhere in Minnesota, and 9590 even travels into Montana and southern Idaho. That's how broadly adapted it is. So the fit is for most of the acres we might consider growing wheat on in the states of North Dakota, Minnesota, and even South Dakota.
I think it's pretty fair to say that 9590 is probably the fastest growth variety, wheat variety, in the state of Minnesota. Wouldn't you agree, Grant?
It sure is. It really is true. And the variety survey results that come out from the University of Minnesota, or the Minnesota Wheat Council, I should say, that will also show that over the course of 3 years, we've grown from 0% to 1% to 10 or 12%, and this year probably even possibly higher than that. Really rapid growth and uptake. So the opportunities in 9590, why should you grow it? The number one opportunity with 9590 that I think about is balance. It brings with it almost an unheralded combination of both yield and protein. And then the standability to make both those things pay. Has just enough standability to push yields, and at the same time, we really expect 13.5 to 14% protein on 9590. It's a combination of both that really raises the dial up. And the other opportunity is just straw management. 9590 is not an antique wheat variety. It's not a tall wheat variety. It's a nice short stature, as you can see, easy threshing, but yet has a lot of grain with it. You don't need tall wheat to make a lot of grain. The watch out with 9590, you can't talk about a variety without talking about its 1 or 2 negatives. It's really going to be head scab. We're at a 6 on the rating scale, which is moderately susceptible. Nowhere near a train wreck, but what 9590 is in most of the wet years, we need to spray Prosaro. We need to spray a head scab fungicide to protect the seed from dawn or from head scab. And that's really the primary watch out on 9590. Anything to add, Troy?
Why wouldn't I grow that on all my acres, Grant? That sounds so good. What would be a good companion variety?
You know it, and to be honest, that's a question I've gotten quite a bit. 9590 seems like the best WestBred. I need to grow it on all my acres. Well, honestly, there are reasons to not just grow 9590. It's an exceptional variety, but there are years where its testing drops down just a little bit. So let's move over to the next WestBred, and I'll show you why you might want to consider something else in the pipeline.
It goes back to, folks, what we originally said. You need at least 3 varieties. We always, in the northern plains, get different weather thrown at us, early heat, late heat, different diseases, and you need to grow different varieties on your farm. And we're going to talk about one that is really a strong companion product to 9590.
Absolutely. Yeah, just before I go into 9479, I'd like to mention kind of off what Troy said. I get the luxury of kind of poring over all the data I can find all fall, year after year after year. And I could tell you exactly the years where 9590 tested best, where 9479 tested best, did exceptional. I also could tell you a year or two where maybe one of these varieties or competitor varieties tested very poorly. And that's really a testament to you shouldn't just make your decisions based on one year, but you also need to diversify because there are certain environments where Mother Nature says, nope, this type of variety will not do well this year. Quite important. So 9479, actually I happen to be standing in 9479. What's its fit, its opportunity, and its watchouts? Well, the fit for 9479, geographically speaking, it doesn't travel quite as far south and west into our territory as I mentioned about 9590. We're going to look at this variety more in the eastern half of the Northern Plains and especially the northern tier of the Northern Plains. It really does well when you're pushing yields and you're getting into those higher yield categories. That's the fit. Not to get into the watchouts too soon, but one of the watchouts is just under tougher drought type conditions, stresses. That might be the weakness of 9479. It's just not going to compete quite like some of our other WestBreds will. The other watchout with 9479 while I'm on it is back to head scab. It's also moderately susceptible. Simply put, it's a 6. We want to spray for sorrow. We want to spray a head scab fungicide to protect in any scabby environment. The opportunities. That's why 9479 should be on most farms as a companion variety to anything you're growing, are the opportunities. There's 3 opportunities that I really think about with 9479, and that is, 1, protein. It's in the very upper category of elite varieties for grain protein. Second, it's standability. It's got straw strength that also puts it right in that elite category with the top 4 or 5 varieties of being just strong, strong straw when we're pushing yields, pushing fertility. And the third opportunity with 9479 is really just thinking about maximizing yield and profitability on our farms by putting on the applications, putting on the inputs. This is a variety that can really do well when you look at your highest productivity index fields, you look at putting down a heavy load of fertility, protecting it with good herbicides, a high rate of fungicide, and want to get something that could have high yields, very little issues with lodging, and get you still in that 14 to 15% protein while being in exceptionally high yields. We've seen this variety at 100 bushels, 14 and a half protein when it's pushed for yield. That's the type of variety 9479 can be for you.
Grant, how do you think this would do under irrigation in the western parts of Minnesota?
There are pockets where irrigation and spring wheat on irrigation is important. You go to the Ponsford Prairie by Park Rapids, it's a potato wheat type rotation. They need wheat for the potatoes. This is our best irrigated variety, and I would probably wager that this is the best irrigated variety there is out here on the market. The standability, and we know on those irrigated acres, they're putting down nitrogen, kind of spoon-fed. They might even be putting down Palisade for a growth regulator, just because they cannot have lodging on irrigated wheat. This is the variety that can really push yield, protein, and standability on irrigated farms, which there are plenty of in the state of Minnesota. And we're going to be going on to 9719. Troy mentioned earlier how critical maturity is in wheat. And why is it critical? Some years, the heat turns on and the late maturing varieties really fail because they just were too late, they burnt up, they didn't fill the grain. Other years, we plant really early, we stay a little cooler, and the late maturity varieties just excel. They look the best out of everything. And that's why I really truly think you should not grow your whole farm to one maturity. You should plant, if you're having 3 varieties, plant something that's on the moderately early, something that's medium, and something that's late. And stagger them around so that you hedge your bets. You're kind of overall having some insurance on maturity. And the reason I go into maturity is because I'm in 9719 right now. Our latest variety that's really being grown around here. The 97, the 7 is maturity. 9719 is a good 3 days later than the 94 or the 95 that I just talked about. And that's a good thing because as we move north, as we move into longer growing seasons, sometimes this variety is by far the highest yielding variety in the trial, and it's because of that late maturity. But what's the fit, the opportunity, and the watch out for this variety? The fit. This is also being grown across South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota, and even into Montana. It is broad. The fit could be described as somewhat of a tough acre variety. We maybe don't talk about tough acre varieties enough in wheat like we do in corn, for instance, but this is a tough acre variety. Tough acres in Polk County, what are they? Well, we do have some. We have some tough fields just because they're tough. We have some wheat that's grown after sugar beets. We have some wheat that's grown after sunflowers. That is where you need a tough variety. This variety can do more with less water, and that's what makes it tough. It does better under stress. So that's the fit. Broadly adapted, but especially to the toughest, lowest productivity index acres on your farm. The opportunity in 9719. A few opportunities I really speak to. Troy, you have experience with this variety under drought. How does this variety do when we just get into low yielding environments?
We take this variety and we move it into really the western 2/3 of North Dakota, and it does exceptional. It is our best pick for stress acres, and also Grant mentioned following sugar beets. It would be a great placement. What about test weight on this variety, Grant? You and I have experienced it. It is exceptional, correct?
It is something to get excited about. That's why we're talking about the opportunities in this variety. Troy mentioned one of the biggest opportunities, and it's test weight. This variety actually is elite, best-in-class test weight. And farmers have told us that. We've had fields come off of this stuff at 66, 65 pounds per bushel. Exceptional test weight. And one of the things about it is it's just got these seeds that are kind of stocky, short, and they just really do well in the test weight category. The other opportunity with this variety, in addition to being a late variety, so it really does well as you go north. I have seen this variety test so well along the Canadian border. It just year in, year out, just really does well under that. But the disease that I want to hit on for opportunity is bacterial leaf streak. A little bit later, we might talk about diseases. The number 2 disease in this area is bacterial leaf streak. This variety is WestBred's best, and it's right up there at the top of the categories for all varieties grown for BLS, bacterial leaf streak. And that's why having a few different varieties to hedge on the diseases that you'll have across your farms is important. 9719, the other opportunity I just want to talk about is it does so well as we move west and move into tougher farms. We see this variety just really doing well in variety trials or farm averages, even on some of those tougher soils. So do consider this variety as one of the ones you want to try. The watchout. The last thing I want to mention about this variety, the watchout, well, for us, we pride ourselves on lodging. Standability is number 1, even before yield, because we don't want our farmers to have to pick up lodged wheat. But this variety's watchout is it's just a little weaker straw than the earlier ones I talked about. Mayville, 9479, 9590. Now, it's not poor straw by any means, but don't be expecting something that's as strong as a Mayville or a 9479. So I want to mention that. The other watchout is, again, back to head scab. We're at a 6, moderately susceptible. In the scabby environments, we spray for head scab. And that does it on 9719. Anything else to add on those big 3 varieties, Troy?
I would just say 9590, to frame it up, is our number 1 variety, followed very closely by 9479. That is the 1-2 punch. But as Grant mentioned, bacterial leaf streak in this variety is exceptional, and that has had a head of steam in the last 3 years, and it is a great variety following sugar beets.
There is some issues with a few tough agronomic pests in this area. Sawfly is one of them. I saw some sawflies a few weeks ago as I was walking fields around here, and that's where 9377 comes in. It's a Montana sawfly spring wheat variety, solid stem, does very well. If you're considering needing a solid stem variety, 9377 is one of them. But we won't really touch on it too much in this area because it is somewhat of a niche market.
But Grant, do I really, if I have a little bit of damage on the outside edges of my fields, do I need a sawfly variety?
And that is the eternal question. Can you still outperform the yield drag you'll get on a 9377, a sawfly variety?
Or any of the solid stems, correct?
Right. Any of the solid stems, absolutely. There is yield drag with a solid stem. And sometimes if you just grow a conventional variety, if you will, push through those headlands, get your cutter down low, plan for that, you'll still be in better shape. And honestly, that's what happens in Montana. Yes, they have severe sawfly pressure, but 50% of those sawfly acres go to the highest yielding varieties farmers just prepare to possibly combine wheat that looks a little tough. I'm standing in WestBred's newest variety. It's called WB9606. I'll talk just a little bit about this. It's new. There won't be a lot of seed available right away, but still could be something to watch out for. I think about wheat varieties sort of in three buckets, and that's why 9606 is important. There's the high yield, but low protein varieties. There's the balanced varieties that kind of bring average yield, average protein. And then there's the low yield, but very high protein varieties. Three general buckets, okay? 9606 is very much in that first bucket. High yield, pushing for one of the highest yielding varieties on the market, but it's going to be, with that, bringing a little bit less protein. We're not talking 11%, we're talking 12.5%, 13% protein, but just lower than you'd expect from all the other WestBreds. So the fit for 9606 is those high yielding acres. They do exist in Minnesota, where we're growing the highest yielding varieties, but it's really especially where you're looking at high yield. Those 10% of the acres, 15% of your farm's acres, where you're growing a very high yielding variety. The opportunity is just what that is. It's yield. Yield is the #1 priority for this variety, and as some years there's no protein premium, well, that's where a 9606 really makes sense. The watch out on a 9606, in this region, Troy and I, for the last 3-4 years, have prided ourselves on straw strength. This would be our weakest straw strength variety. Now, again, I'm going to say it won't be a train wreck, but it's not going to probably have the straw strength you're used to with the 9479, Mayville, 9590. So you want to be wary with this variety if you're pushing it. Treat it like varieties that have a little weaker straw strength and think about it in that sense. So overall, that covers the WestBred lineup of spring wheats. We do also have some exciting winter wheats, not as big of a priority in this area, but in a given this year where there is some prevent plant, there's a little bit of chatter about winter wheats, time for a different discussion.
Grant, one of the things is plant height. You didn't mention that on 9606.
Yeah, go back to that. Absolutely, circle back. We do, a lot of people know Mayville. Mayville is that moderately short variety, quite short. The 9606 will have a little bit taller height. So, thinking about 9719, we're looking at 2 to 3 inches taller than 9719. Similar varieties out in the marketplace that would be this tall would be kind of like a Fall or a Prosper, a Cropland 3419, a few of those. So it will have a bit more straw, and that could be a benefit if you're a straw person, but overall, think about that as you're growing it. It may be the variety that are for some of those tougher acres where you just don't get as much height expression. Something I really want to talk about is lodging. Now, we haven't seen a lot of lodging yet this year, but we have seen some, no doubt. And we're in kind of the sweet spot of this next month, where these next storms that roll in will cause lodging across the state of Minnesota, and I'm moving west into North Dakota. At WestBred, as I told you earlier, when we rank out traits, lodging is right up here. It's #1. Because without lodging, yield doesn't matter. We do not want to be combining lodged wheat. Yield gets hurt so badly. Efficiency of combining wheat gets hurt so badly, so lodging is important. We're going to show you a picture right now of a strip trial from last year, not that far away from here as the crow flies, in kind of northern Cass County, of what the WestBreds can do under, in this picture, was 4 inches of rain over 2 days in early July, when the wheat actually wasn't all that far advanced. There wasn't that much grain in the head. Lodging is important. The WestBred varieties are bred to have excellent straw strength, and we want you to know that because nobody likes to combine lodged wheat. It can take 20% of your yield, and it's just no fun.
Grant, really to segue the lodging over to plant population, that's something we didn't talk about before. Where would you place as far as plant population in our core varieties of 9479, 9590, and 9719?
It's not just varieties. Troy nailed it. It's the management of those varieties. There's so many important decisions in wheat that you have to get just right to have a profitable crop. And seeding rate is one of them. Purchasing, planting the right amount of seed for maximum yield. In the WestBreds I talked about, the 9590, the 9479, the 9719, we've really found the sweet spot to be right about there in the middle, The range would be 1.4 million pure live seeds to 1.6 million pure live seeds. I don't really want to have the conversation today because we all know, let's plant based on the seed count and the million seeds per acre we want to get out there. Let's not plant based on 2 bushels, which could be who knows how many seeds planted out there. But we want to be right in that 1.4 to 1.6. And as we get later, we're going to push them up a little bit. I'm predicting that in the variety I'm standing in, 9606, we're going to keep that seeding rate down to 1.2, 1.3, just to mitigate a little bit of lodging issues, but we'll really get more information on that as we come. But really do pay attention to seeding rate. It is important as we're buying new seed. Let's buy the right amount of seed to make our wheats profitable.
And along that same stream of lodging, doesn't the wheat overall, as we travel across North Dakota and Northwest Minnesota, doesn't it seem shorter?
It sure does. So let's talk about that short wheat. In this crop today, I would say that I'm pretty well going to touch it as I'm walking through. I'm 5'6". Short wheat, does it hurt your yield? Well, there's 2 different types of short wheat. There's short wheat because of drought, and there's short wheat because of the environment. Height in wheat is triggered by 2 things. It's triggered by the genetics, and it's triggered by the temperature, and also moisture. I should say 3 things. Now, the question Troy and I have been getting so much is, why is my wheat so short, and does it have any yield? And the answer is, it's so short mostly because of the environment. We had so many warm days, and that really just accumulated growing degree day units too fast, and a lot of our wheat ended up with really short internode spaces, wheat leaves put on fast, and it's short. As an example, 9590, we would bill it at a 27, 28 inch tall wheat. We'll see a fair bit of 9590 that's 20, 22, 23 inches tall this year. Does that hurt your yield? My answer to that is get out and look at your wheat. Look at the number of tillers. Do I have 2.5 to 3 million heads per acre? And look at your heads. How big are they? Do I have dinky heads that are 8 to 10 spikelet rows? Or do I have nice heads that are 10, 12, 14 spikelet rows? If you've got good heads on your wheat, you likely have a good chance to not lose a whole lot of yield because your wheat's short, and you'll end up with a pretty solid crop.